Welcome to PathPulse, Pathology Innovators in Action, your go-to podcast for practical and implemented digital pathology insights.
Welcome to PathPulse, the digital diagnostic podcast. Again, this podcast showcases pioneers, innovators, and forward-thinking individuals in the digital pathology arena who are truly making a difference in the day-to-day use. And I'm James Thackeray. In today's episode, we're diving into a topic where our guest has truly been a trailblazer. Sometimes we overuse those description words, but I think in this case, we are really working with a trailblazer, especially on the social side of slides and how digital platforms are transforming pathology education. So it's an area that we haven't really jumped into too deeply with our past guests, and so we're really excited. We're fortunate to have with us Dr. Kamran Mirza, Professor of Pathology at Michigan Medicine, the Godfrey Stobe Professor of Pathology Education, Assistant Chair for Education, and the Director of the Division of Training Programs and Communication. Dr. Mirza, welcome to PathPulse. We couldn't be more excited to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, James. It's an honor to be here.
You bet. So let's start. I always want to give you the opportunity to kind of set the stage. Give us a little bit of your background and really how you kind of got into, especially the social media aspect to pathology education, because I think it's just, I'm excited to kind of learn more about it as we go through this. But if you don't mind, why don't you just set the stage a little bit about how this has come about?
Sure. So I think that as I was training, there are a couple of things in my background that might be relevant. One is that, I literally split my life into thirds between three different continents. And so I think that I was bringing to my pathology training a view of the world which, might be a little bit different from what others have, and especially a view of the lower middle income countries where, I did medical school in Pakistan, and I was very fortunate to be there, and it was an incredible medical school, and I'm very proud of it. But the surroundings were variable, right? And so the amount of education there was variable, the amount of healthcare there was variable, etc. So when I was in my pathology training, one thing that became pretty clear to me early on was that education is going to be a huge part of my career identity. That was my goal. And hand in hand with that was that I would love for that educational identity to encompass the globe. I think that in general, if I think about what makes me tick, it is the fact that if you have a nugget of information or education that someone has given to you or you have learned, I find that it is criminal if you take it to the grave. The whole idea of education is that it needs to be given, right, back or expanded upon. So I think that, the idea was, well, here I am a pathologist. And I think that when I think about global education in pathology, it's variable across the globe. And I think it's because access to tissues is variable, access to microscopes might be variable. And very importantly, as we think about whole slide imaging and digital pathology, the education piece in pathology actually is probably one of the most positively affected things when we think about digital pathology, because in a way it expands our toolkit in a way that nothing else technologically may have been able to kind of touch, with such breadth and depth, right? And so to bring it to social media, as I was training in pathology, what I realized was that there were groups of individuals who were teaching on platforms that, went beyond the four walls of their classroom. And I was very fortunate. I did a fellowship in medical education. It's called the Merits Fellowship at the University of Chicago, and it's medical education, research, innovation, teaching, and scholarship. And I was very fortunate in that fellowship to be exposed to how people leverage social media for education. And at the time, it was medicine, surgery, pathology wasn't that, kind of rampant in this use. But over the years, as I'm sure all of the listeners know, social media-based education in pathology completely, it just ramped up so quickly. And I think that it's incredible that it's our window to a variety of learners, right? And so I think that it became a very obvious marriage, education and social media, for my pathology world.
So exciting. What a great background. And thank you for kind of that intro in. Maybe let's start more broad, and then we'll kind of narrow in, because I do think just hearing your background, I'm fascinated to get your thoughts on where pathology in general is today and the lack thereof of true diagnostics. And we'll say third world countries, but the truth is we have shortage really throughout the world right now when it comes to pathology. And so I wondered what your thoughts are on education and how that might influence one way or the other pathology as a practice. Is that too broad? I don't know.
No, I don't think it's too broad at all. I think that it's a great question. And I think that whether we look at low middle income countries or whether we look at high income countries, when we think about medical education, pathology is a specialty that in general gets overlooked when it comes to medical student choice for careers. In general, it's not the first thing people think of. When patients go to the doctor's office, they're thinking of a bunch of things. If they get admitted, they're thinking of the surgical care, the nursing care, maybe they think of pharmacy, but they don't think of their diagnostics. They may know about radiology because they go into radiology departments, but they're not familiar with how much the Department of Pathology is touching every single patient. So with that background, what ends up happening is that the focus on pathology is variable, depending on if there's a champion for pathology there in either the execution of healthcare, because pathology is a huge part of it. If you don't know what's happening to the patient, you can't fix them, right? We think about global health. And in general, when you think about global health, the conversation about pathology usually doesn't come up, at least not for the first one or two kind of priority items. But if I would posit that without global pathology, there's no global health. How can you understand what cancers are like in sub-Saharan Africa if you don't have a pathologist reading them, right? And so it's super variable. If you look at the data on the variability of how many pathologists per population are in different parts of the country, we're very lucky in the United States that it's a pretty high number, but there are parts of the world where there's like a pathologist for like multiple millions of people. In fact, in countries like Uganda, like there's just one pathologist or two pathologists in the entire country.
Wow.
So to bring it back to the idea that, so those individuals are incredible superstars. They're trying to do the pathology for like a whole nation or a whole region. And therefore, will they even get time to teach the next generation, right? That's one layer. Is the next generation interested in learning about pathology? That's another layer. So I think that, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but basically to think about it, the idea would be that the approach to pathology is really variable. And I think that the resources to teach pathology are variable and the interest in pathology is variable. But all of that doesn't detract from the fact that pathology is actually one of the biggest and most important pieces of the puzzle in figuring out somebody's healthcare, right? And so I think that, I'm assuming naturally this goes into our next phase of the conversation about how social media can kind of bridge that gap. But in general, I think that there's variability between, nations that have a low middle income and high income. And that said, one last point I'll make is that it's not just low middle income countries, because they may have like areas which are like shining stars of pathology excellence, right? I mean, that exists everywhere. It might even be in high income countries where you have areas that are pathology deserts. You may not have pathology laboratories in like the bulk of a state in the United States, right? And the material is going to the academic centers in the big cities, for example. So then if you're a medical student from this small area and your medical school is there and it's a smaller medical school, you may not even have a pathology department. There are some medical schools that don't have a pathology department. And so how can we raise the next generation of pathologists with that type of background? So bottom line, it's super variable. And could social media or could digital pathology be the equalizer here?
That's great. Thank you. Great perspective. And again, as a non-pathologist, but someone who's been in this area for some time, your emphasis on how critical the diagnostic aspect of everything, downstream, if you don't get that right, and if you don't have access to it, it makes it really challenging. And so maybe at some level, so it's one thing to educate pathologists or even future pathologists on what this can look like. And maybe it's empowering them to help tell the story, of the importance so that so others recognize it. Because I do think at some level it's got to be even a higher level that people recognize the value. And others are. I mean, certainly therapeutic companies recognize the value. We've got companion diagnostics. We have all sorts of things that are coming to fruition that are based off of the diagnostics. So I think we're getting there, but
it's getting better for sure.
It's getting better. So,
and maybe social media is one of the reasons it's getting better, actually.
That's where I wanted to go with it is so now take that. And I do believe you mentioned this, you referenced that digital pathology in general may also be an equalizer in bringing this to the world, right? To pathology diagnostics to the world, which I think we all assume is a big, I think we get excited about that as a key piece. Tie the digital pathology to kind of the social media side of it, if you would, and tell us just some of the approaches you've taken. I mean, and you could keep it to just the education side on social media, but then maybe we can tie it into digital pathology since this is a digital pathology podcast.
Sure.
Is that fair?
Absolutely. So digital pathology, I guess it's a perfect marriage of like innovation and kind of intent with imagination of what we can do with this. Digital pathology takes the language of pathology and makes it accessible, right? In a way that, you're not restricted to a room and a microscope. That's number one. Social media breaks the walls of the classroom, and the world is your classroom. All you need is access to the internet and obviously electricity and social media platforms, right? Which are pretty much free, most of them. So the idea would be that when you marry both of these things together, it allows you to extend your, the global classroom is available. So let me say a few things about social media, because I know that there are people listening who are like shaking their heads already. So I would say don't be a hater. Everything has a bad side. Social media has a bad side, 100%. But we're focusing only on what we can use that, for good, basically, right? And so, at least in my opinion, if done correctly, you can use social media as a great platform for pathology education. And since it, there's certain platforms that are now very taboo and certain ones that are more accepted, but irrespective of the platform, right? You can choose your poison of choice. Any platform that has a social presence or a web presence is amenable to teaching pathology, because pathology is visual and these platforms are very visual, right? So we're lucky in that sense, right? We're not writing hours of content to read, right? We're showing an image and teaching about the image. So to tie it back to digital pathology is a visual language, right? And therefore marrying it with a visual platform makes sense, right? Provided obviously there's no metadata, there's we're taking care of HIPAA, these are de-identified, things, everything is kind of kosher. But the idea is that means that, we've taken the slide from the microscope and we've put it on a digital platform, and now we've used social media and we can teach the world. So, bottom line is I think that that's a very powerful combination, right? And as social media can be used for multiple different things, between politics and geography and history, there's so much that people are learning. You can certainly learn pathology on these platforms as well. And you can have a reach that is definitely beyond your own institution or your department.
That's great. Thank you. And maybe let's elaborate on some of the digital platforms, particularly through initiatives. I mean, we talked before we got on, like the virtual pathology student interest group, and PathElective facilities, the sharing of digital slides across geographical and institutional barriers. Dive into that so people can kind of say, oh gosh, that is one way that through social media, that's a whole different level of education that we probably have never embarked on, or at least not in pathology. Let's put it that way.
Right. So I'll start with PathSIG. So PathSIG is the Virtual Pathology Student Interest Group. It is a student interest group for medical students and pre-medical health related students to understand more about pathology, right? And this is similar to how you would have a pathology student interest group in your own medical school, but that's so variable in interest, and sometimes they fail because there are not that many people. And so we decided to create one on social media. I was very lucky to kind of start working with the team a couple of years ago where, I founded it, and, these teams, these boards have taken it on, and every year we have an incredible board. We have a new board for virtual PathSIG. So, we're on all the platforms, social media platforms, and the job of virtual PathSIG primarily is to think about the pathways to pathology, right? Thinking about the pipeline, and encouraging individuals who are studying health-related fields to learn more about the pathology lab and like medical laboratory sciences. And so as part of that, obviously, when we encourage them, obviously, we're going to show them data, we're going to show them lifestyle, we're going to show them all this stuff, and then education is a piece. And when education is a piece of it, the digital pathology becomes a part of it. For many trainees coming up the training pathways, being digital is a way of understanding that things are modernized. And so, they go to radiology departments and they see digital things, and they go to pathology departments and they see microscopes. And so they wonder, wow, is this like cutting edge? But digital pathology to them is really cutting edge. There are a few things we've learned about medical students. You can attract them by digital pathology, you can attract them by molecular pathology. They love to learn about autopsies. And so that's kind of like the gateway drugs, right? To bring them in, the gateway to the understanding of pathology. But directly talking about digital pathology and education, you mentioned PathElective. So PathElective is a website, totally free website for anyone to use, that I had the great fortune to found with my co-founder, Cullen, who is currently a pathology resident, chief resident at UCLA. He was my medical student at the time we started doing this. And this is a website that has 300,000 users now. It has over 3 million views across the world. And it's broken up into modular sections of anatomic and clinical pathology. And many of them have digital pathology as the way our educators, and there's like over 50 faculty that that volunteered their time. It's a completely free effort. It's amazing. I'm so proud of it. It's like our little baby. But digital pathology is how they teach, right? Because you can do two-dimensional snapshot pathology images to teach, but then there's another element of being able to connect to a particular platform. We partnered with Path Presenter. They were so amazing. We kind of used their free digital library. There are other places where digital libraries exist as well, but I really wanted to give a shout out to Path Presenter for PathElective specifically, because they were really early partners with us. And so many of our faculty use those freely available slides as the kind of foundation for their teaching. And so whether it be pediatric pathology or gynecological pathology or neuropathology, all of that is there. So in a way, what we've created is a pathology curriculum in the cloud, and you can access it from anywhere. And actually from the website, we have data about where it's accessed from. And it's been accessed from every continent in the world other than Antarctica. So if you go to the Antarctic, please log into PathElective. And most countries in the world, except for a handful, which include some countries like Greenland, North Korea, some countries in sub-Saharan Africa. But other than that, every country has at least one person who's logged in. So it's very powerful. But it's the same thing that, we come back to this conversation of the fact that they're web or social media linked platforms, and there's digital pathology, and that marriage is very powerful.
That's so exciting. And when you say it's a baby, and now it's grown, what a great
it's a big baby. Yeah.
It is interesting because we had a very early podcast around trying to get potential pathologists. So those that were in, med school and just trying to figure out what specialty they wanted to go into. Right. What a great tool to kind of educate them on all the things that are happening. And quite frankly, not only is there the need for pathology, as we know, but I do think the innovation I'd love to get your feedback, but the innovation that's gone into pathology, especially when you look at anatomic pathology, I guess all types of pathology in general, there's been more advancement, I feel like, in the last 5 or 6 years than in a long time prior to that. So having that education tool to say, here's what's changed about the specialty. Mm-hmm. Do you have any, I'm just curious if you agree with that. But
I mean, I love that notion, right? The idea that actually I'm sure like there are many other facets of medicine that have modernized a lot, but actually pathology continuously has been bringing in ancillary studies. And a lot of people are like, oh, digital pathology, now AI is going to replace the pathologist. But this isn't the first time that pathologists have been confronted with someone saying, oh, XYZ will replace you, right? It's an interesting kind of dynamic. We still have the microscope, which is technically a really old school thing. I mean, it's modernized and it's incredible. I love my microscope. You can't see it. It's like right here. We name them and all. I'm just joking. Some people name them. But the idea is that we have this old technology, but we have brand new technology and our ancillary toolkit from molecular studies, karyotyping studies, genetic studies, the flow cytometry studies, all like the in situ hybridization. Like, I mean, there's so many things from special stains to special tests. And so we've been modernizing, not like you mentioned, definitely for the last 5 years, like, optical genome mapping. I mean, these are all things pathologists are doing or molecular pathologists are doing. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. It is that social media again becomes the megaphone through which you can, tell people that, hey, you know what, come check us out. We've been modernizing. We have some cool things, bells and whistles. We're not just like basement dweller, antisocial, curmudgeon type of people, which is what a lot of people think about.
Yes.
Yeah, when they think of Path.
But it is that convergence of the new technology with old technology, and there's been a lot that we've had to build out, and a lot we've had to learn in these last few years. But I think what's exciting for me is that at least fundamentally, or at least I think as a whole, we're excited to adopt the new technologies.
Yes.
You mentioned AI, so maybe let's tie that into the social media platform space a little bit, specific obviously to pathology. What role do you see? Is it currently playing a role? I mean, I can already see if you've got this, through Path Presenter or whatever, you can look at different slides and educate on that. You could start to access different algorithms that are obviously integrated in. But give me the AI aspect of the social media education, if you would.
Yeah, so I guess we can tie the AI aspect to the digital pathology, right? I mean, social media again would just be the megaphone, but the idea would be that large language models or GPTs and other things can have a variety of benefits in education, right? Specifically pathology education. One is that there might be visual kind of parameters or patterns that large language models can pick up on that maybe the human eye isn't seeing. Ultimately, it might make our job, like take away the repetitive kind of burdensome tasks and allow us to do the higher level physician linked activities of really confirming that something is abnormal or not. From the pathology angle, though, from the diagnostic angle, that was what we can do, and many more things. So I think it won't replace us. At least that's my prediction. I think that it will make it'll probably refine our roles to be able to do different things, and I think that that's going to be a welcome thing. And I think that in order to create a successful outcome in that, pathologists have to be involved in it, right? And so there shouldn't be any sticking their heads in the sand and not thinking about it, because if pathologists don't think about how to incorporate it, then someone else will. And you don't want anybody else's lack of expertise to get in the way of something being successful. From the educator's perspective, AI has several roles, I think. You can think about personalized education and thinking about an AI-built dashboard for your particular education. People have thought about content-centered education versus learner-centered education, but the truth is that many of our young learners now are self-directing their learning, and we don't have a way to kind of figure out where all of the different pieces are in their educational journey. But AI can holistically take a look at it and say, you've been doing these few things from across the web space. This is your medical knowledge. This is your competence assessment, and then putting it together as a personalized way of telling them that this is what you need to work on. Similarly, we can build AIs to be Socratic, and instead of giving them answers, to kind of jog their memory or nudge them into thinking a particular way. So when I imagine myself as an educator, educating a group of people and discussing a case with them, and not providing them the answer, but encouraging them to think about certain things, you can prompt GPTs to be just like that, right? Act like become a Socratic AI, act like a teacher, do not answer the question, nudge people in the right direction. And so there are ways that we can perhaps, extend our influence outside the classroom using AI as well. And again, yes, I agree, AIs can hallucinate and you have to be very careful and all of that stuff. So I'm not denying any of those things. I just think that all of these positive things can also be leveraged.
That's great. I appreciate that. when you think about what are the biggest challenges when you think about the social media platform as a way of educating in this sense? What are challenges you've run into? And maybe I'll start by saying, I guess historically, I haven't always associated pathology as a specialty anyway to social media, where other specialties that I've been in or have worked with seem to be more aggressive in their adoption of social media. Where does pathology fit into that? Or is this pre-pathology in a lot of cases? And so just walk me through some of the challenges that you faced and how you see it going forward.
I would say that pathology is actually pretty up there with its adoption of social media. It may not have been the first specialty to do it, but I'm certain, I have no data to back this up, but I'm pretty certain that the pathology space in social media is a pretty robust space. I think the challenges, though, are a lack of an understanding of how this can be beneficial and maybe a denial of kind of even. So I don't think they're technological challenges. I'll start there. I don't think that technology is a challenge, even though some people, like we've actually published that the challenges to certain people are technology or, worrying about HIPAA, like, all of those things. So there's a paper out there. But I think that really it is more about the fact that there's a denial. I don't even know if it's a denial, to be honest with you. I just think that there's a reluctance to venture outside individual comfort zones, to embrace the wide unknown of social media when it comes to pathology, and much of that reluctance I can understand. It's not that it's not unfounded. There are horrible things that happen on social media, and people are just like, let's just be safe, right? So I think that it takes like a cohort of champions to kind of encourage people to safely think about, broadening their footprint and coming out into this world. And so I think that in general, reluctance is one thing, because social media to many people is still a bad word, right? And this was kind of like 10 years ago, it was a bad word. And now with the politics built into it, as we know, global politics, national politics, that hasn't helped, right? And so here we are, a group of people trying to push pathology education forward on platforms that are polarizing, right? People either love them or they hate them. And so I think that that's another challenge. So, you take their reluctance and you can try and champion that, but you can't get rid of the global politics part of it, right? And so I think that to me, I certainly come back to the fact that there's a global audience still, though, right? There are lectures that people have given, which are recorded online, that have been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. That's a lot of people learn. I mean, one could argue that that's a lot of people learning, right? Like sometimes my kids look at my, if I have some random YouTube video out there, right? They'll be like, oh my God, this has been like viewed like 10,000 times, right? And sure, it's not like a crazy viral YouTube video, but that means 10,000 people potentially came onto that platform to learn what someone was trying to teach them. And I think that that's certainly powerful. So to me, that's the balance. Of course, there's reluctance. There should be appropriate reluctance. There should be caution when we use these things. Nobody should do it with recklessness. But that said, it's a powerful tool, and it's up to us to kind of use it whichever way we want to.
That is so well said. And it ties actually, in my mind, very directly to, or at least it's analogous to digital pathology in general, right? There are inherent concerns with it. There's validations that need to be done. There's all sorts of things that still need to be figured out when it comes to AI and the way that it works. There's a lot of questions, but to your point, these platforms provide a way that really there is no other way that could scale or get that kind of information out at that level. Yeah. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. One, that it can be used for good, and they often are. And it's really more about us and how we use them than it is, what others are doing necessarily. But so I think as a platform, it's such a great tool to advance pathology. Okay, I'm going to give you kind of the final, give me your final thoughts on how this is going, the trajectory, and where you see it. Because you're in this early stage where you're getting such great feedback. But if you were to say, in 5 I mean, this goes so fast. I don't know, maybe it's 5 years or 10 years. What does this look like as it pertains to education through a social platform, specifically for pathology?
I think that the need will drive where this goes. If there continues to be a need for resources that, surpass boundaries, like geographic boundaries or whatever it is, then this will continue to grow. So this is all free. Most of it is free, right? And if people are using a free thing, that means that they must like it, right? That's number one.
Yeah.
So I think that the future is that, at least the immediate future, is that we will still continue to explore ways to leverage and maximize digital pathology using a platform, your platform of choice, to be more vocal, more visible, and to really show how vital we are to healthcare. And I think that's not changing anytime soon. I think that there'll be bumps along the way, but when we think about AI and the fact that that's not going anywhere, I think that we have to be more, how do I say it? We have to be less reluctant. We have to be less reluctant, and we have to be more open to embracing technologies that we are not familiar with, in order to kind of continue to grow, right? Growth requires a little bit of uncomfortability. And so I would say, think outside the box and, embrace certain technological advances, because that is going to be needed to stay relevant. So bottom line is that social media and digital pathology and artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence probably, in my prediction, will continue to ramp up, not only their your utility, but also how people leverage them and their ability to touch more people around the globe. And to me, that's a vital part of us being, showing how vibrant a community we are. And I would say that it's very important to stay relevant. So consider embracing these technologies.
So well said. And the timing of this and what you're doing it just seems like the right convergence of timing and technology with a forward-thinking person like yourself. So thank you. We're really excited about the work you're doing and really appreciate that you joined us today, Dr. Mirza.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to PathPulse, Pathology Innovators in Action. Tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with digital pathology experts.